He stumbled forward, so lost in thought that he hadn't seen the pair of children until they'd slammed into him. "Sorry, mister," the boy cried. The girl gazed up at him with solemn brown eyes. Turalyon smiled and patted her hair as he spoke to the boy. "With an attack like that, you'll make a fine soldier one day," he said. "Oh yes, sir. I hope so, sir." "You think all the orcs will be dead before I'm old enough to kill them?" Turalyon's smile faltered. "I'm sure you'll be able to serve the Alliance well," he said, evading the question. Revenge, the fiery need and anger it kindled in the heart, had cost Turalyon someone he loved. He would say nothing to foster racial hatred in a child. Keeping his hand on the girl's head, he murmured a soft prayer. Light glowed around his hands for a brief moment. The child was enveloped in radiance. Turalyon lifted his other hand and blessed the boy as well. Awe shone in both pairs of eyes that regarded him. "Light bless you both. Now, you had best be getting home. Looks like rain." The boy nodded and grabbed his sister's hand. "Thanks, Mr. Paladin." The two ran toward their home. It was not far. Turalyon realized they lived in the building adjacent to the cathedral, the orphanage. So many orphans, so many lives lost. Thunder rumbled again, and the heavens let loose. Rain began pouring down in sheets. Turalyon sighed, pulling his cape around himself and running lightly up the steps to the cathedral, getting soaked even in that short distance. The smell of incense and the soft, barely audible sound of chanting coming from somewhere in the building soothed him at once. He had become used to giving orders, to fighting battles, to emerging from them covered in his own blood or that of the orcs. It was good to come back to the church, and to remember his origins as a simple priest. A soft smile curved his lips as he beheld his brethren, his fellow knights of the Silver Hand, doing their duties here as surely as they had on the battlefield. Archbishop Alonzus Fowl had created the order 3 years ago, and it was by his decree that the paladins now served humbly in the communities that had been so devastated by the war. Even as he looked around, Turalyon saw his old friend Uther, whom he himself had given the title Lightbringer. Turalyon was used to seeing the powerfully built man in full armor, swinging his weapon, his ocean-colored eyes afire with zeal as the light came to him in the form of powerful attacks. But Uther now was clad in simple robes. He was attending to a woman who looked exhausted and drained, gently wiping her forehead with a damp cloth and cradling something in his free hand. As Turalyon drew closer, he saw that the bundle Uther held so gently was a newborn, its skin still mottled from birth. The new mother smiled tiredly, but happily, and reached for her child. Its lusty, healthy wail was the sharp, sweet song of hope. Uther rested his hand on the woman and blessed her and her child, as Turalyon had done with the orphans earlier. Turalyon realized that although Uther was obviously at home on the battlefield, using the light to take the lives of those who would slay him and those he served, he was equally at home here in the cathedral, bringing a new little life into the world. Such was the dichotomy of paladins. They were warriors and healers both. Uther glanced up and smiled, rising to greet his friend. "Turalyon," he said in his deep, gruff voice. The two paladins clasped hands. "Good to see you. About time you found your way down here." Uther cuffed the younger man playfully. "You're right," Turalyon agreed, chuckling. "It's good to be here. It's too easy to get caught up in all the things that need to be done, but can never be quite finished. Like a rat problem. Eh? I'll tell you later. For now, how can I help?" This was what mattered, he thought, not staying holed up in the keep pushing paper. Uther's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked over Turalyon's shoulder. "I think you've got some of that unfinished business right here," he said. "Oh?" Turalyon said casually, turning around. It was like seeing a ghost. A moment wrenched out of its proper place in space and time, and incongruously reenacted. She stood before him, face and hair and clothing wet, emerald eyes fixed with his eyes. She had gotten caught in the rain, looking almost as she had that night, nearly 2 years ago, coming to him now as she had come to. Ilaria Windrunner's eyes narrowed, as if she, too, recalled that night, and found it an unpleasant memory. Trallion felt a chill sweep over him that had nothing to do with his wet clothing. She bowed, stiffly, first to Uther, then to him. Lightbringer. General. Ah, this was how it was going to be played, then. Ranger. He was surprised at how calm his voice sounded. He had half expected it to crack with emotion. What brings you here? Tidings, she said, of the worst sort. Her eyes flickered to Trallion's, then back to Uther's. Little else would. Trallion felt a muscle twitch in his cheek and gritted his teeth. Then pray deliver them. The elf looked around, slightly contemptuously. I wonder if I have not come to the wrong place for aid. I did not expect to find generals, knights, and holy warriors tending to babies in a church. Trallion welcomed the anger. It chased away the heart sickness. We serve where we are called, Alaria. All of us. I feel certain you didn't come all the way here just to insult us. Speak. Alaria sighed. A short time ago, I met with Khadgar and several of the Alliance leaders, including your own king. It seems that there is a dimensional rift where the dark portal once stood. Khadgar believes that very soon, orcs, perhaps an entire second horde, could come through again. He sent me on Griffinback at once to inform you. She had their attention now, and they listened in silence as she repeated what she had learned. Not for the first time since the line of Azeroth's death, Trallion wished Anduin and Lothar were here. He often found himself wishing that when faced with a difficult decision, or impending combat, or simply the need to talk to someone, Lothar would have responded instantly, calmly but decisively, and others could not have helped, but followed. While the veterans of the war had begun calling themselves the Sons of Lothar, Trallion himself, Lothar's lieutenant, was not comfortable with the term. He did not feel like a son of the great man, although he would defend Lothar's ideals to his last breath. He was still thinking when Alaria finished talking and turned her eyes expectantly upon him. Well, she demanded, what say the Wildhammers on all this? What does Kurdran think? I doubt he knows, Alaria admitted, the blonde ranger having the grace to at least be embarrassed by the statement. What? You flew all this way to inform me, on one of their griffins, no less, and no one told the Wildhammer's leader what was going on? She shrugged again, and Trallion bit back a curse. During the Second War, the Alliance had fought all together, elves and humans and dwarves, both the Wildhammers and their Bronzebeard cousins, side by side. But in the past year, it seemed that the human rulers had been distancing themselves from their non-human allies. The elves still participated in the defense of Nethergard, but that was as much from their fascination with all magics as from any desire to help humans. The Bronzebeard dwarves had an ambassador, Mirrodin Bronzebeard, at Lordaeron, and so they maintained close ties with King Tyrannus. And there was a cheerful little Mechatork and his assistants here in Stormwind. Trallion felt the heat of shame rush through him at the recollection of his amusement at the gnome's early expense, when Mechatork and his people were performing an invaluable service to strangers. But for all the Wildhammer's loyalties and bravery and skill, many humans seemed to think the Griffin Riders little more than savages. Will you wait for the dwarves to give you instructions, or perhaps Lothar's ghost? Trallion frowned. Color rose in Alaria's cheeks, and she glanced down, realizing she had gone too far. The Wildhammers have been staunch allies, Trallion said in a soft, yet sure voice. They are as much a part of the Alliance as anyone. I will see to it that they are informed as soon as possible. We must go immediately, Alaria said. The Griffin will bear you to Lordaeron. I will make my own way there. She wouldn't even ride with him, then. Trallion didn't answer at once. He glanced at Uther, who was bridling on his behalf. Their eyes met for a moment. The bigger man nodded and turned back to the young mother and her child. You will bring the members of your order, yes? Alaria said, almost perfunctorily, as if she knew the answer already. When Trallion shook his head, her jaw dropped. What? Why not? The Archbishop wishes them to stay here and in Lordaeron, to tend to the people who need them. You haven't even asked. I know without asking. Don't worry. If the need is great enough, they will come. But need can take many forms. Come, let us talk for a bit. We should. 5 minutes will change nothing." She frowned. He realized she was shivering. A drop of rain slid from her wet hair down to her face, looking like a tear, but it was nothing nearly so soft. At that instant, he wanted to pull her into his arms so badly. This coldness, this venom that poisoned her words and turned her lovely face ugly with hatred. He knew what it was, and he knew why she carried it. And the knowing was like a knife in his heart. "I wrote. You never answered," he said quietly. She shrugged, pulling her cloak about her slim frame automatically, although what she needed was dry clothing. "I have been traveling, on patrol. Our most recent task was a patrol through the Alterac Mountains," Ilaria said. "There were rumors of orcs hiding among the peaks there." She allowed herself a grim smile. "We found 10 of them." Trallion didn't have to ask what she and her rangers had done with them. He wondered if she started taking trophies. He'd seen her once crouching over a body, a savage grin on her face, and had been stunned by the glee she took in the killing. "Ilaria," he said quietly, "I've been writing to you, and you've never answered. You owe me nothing, I understand that. But if what happened between us means you can no longer work with me, I need to know that now. I'm your commander. I, the Alliance, can't afford to find out on the battlefield that you're not listening or not obeying." He waited until she looked at him. "Do you have a problem with that?" "There is no problem," the blonde elf answered sharply. "The Alliance wants every orc dead. So do I. We can work together on that. That's all we are to you now, a means to an end, a way to kill more orcs more quickly." "What else is there?" she answered. "Khadgar only found me because my band and I were hunting orc renegades in Alterac. I agreed to meet with him at Nethergard because his messenger said it involved orcs, and I agreed to bring his summons to you for the same reason." She frowned. "And the sooner we reach Lordaeron, the sooner I can seek out more of those greenskin abominations and cleanse this land of their filth." Her voice rose with passion, and her eyes flashed. Some heads turned in their direction. "I will see them dead. Every last one of them. Even if it takes me 100 years. Trallion felt a shiver run down his spine. "Ilaria," he began, pitching his voice low, "you're talking genocide." The smile that curved her lips was a cruel one. "It is only genocide when those beings slain our people. This is nothing more than exterminating vermin." He realized with a shock that she honestly believed her words. She really didn't see the orcs as sentient people. She saw them as abominations, as monsters, as rats. Trallion knew he had slain his fair share of them, and had done so at times with great anger in his heart at what they had done to his people. But this, Ilaria didn't want justice. She didn't want the orcs to pay for the crimes they had committed. She wanted to hurt them, to exterminate an entire race if she could. He took a step toward her, reaching out a hand, hoping to connect. "You've lost so much, I know that." Ilaria knocked his hand away. "Ha! A human speaks of loss. What do you know of it? Your lives are so brief, you never learn what it means to truly love someone." Trallion felt the blood drain from his face. For a moment, he couldn't respond. She stared at him, breathing quickly, daring him to speak. "Just because you live longer doesn't mean you feel more," he said. "Trust me on that one." He gave her a lopsided smile. Her face only hardened the more. "So, you are better than me because you live for this long?" she challenged, snapping her fingers. "Or are you better than me because of your precious light? Ilaria, I want to see justice done. You know that. But you're not talking justice. You're talking vengeance. And I see what it's doing to you. The light isn't mine. It's everyone's. It's about healing. It's... Don't you dare lecture me," she warned, her voice dropping to a steely hiss. "Your holy light didn't stop the orcs from tearing open a way into our world, did it? The light can't restore my ravaged homeland, or give me back my..." She closed her jaw with a snap. Trollion stared at her for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "Ranger," he said formally, "here are my orders. For the moment, you will stay here in Stormwind, along with half of my troops and myself. Send for your rangers. Have them gather here. The city has just started to get its feet underneath it. I won't leave it unprotected.